This presentation will summarize the three main types of appeals that one can create in any rhetorical situation: logos, pathos, and ethos. In academic writing, an argument is a claim supported by evidence and explanation. As this slide shows, you can think of an argument as a three-legged stool, where the legs are logos, pathos, and ethos. Every argument features these three types of appeals, or evidence and explanation. One might be emphasized more than the others, but all three will be present in some form. Logos is an appeal based on logic. So why don't we just call it logic? There are two reasons. First, the ancient Greeks called it logos, and the ancient Greeks, Aristotle specifically, have greatly influenced modern rhetoric. Second, the Greeks' ideas about logic, emotion, and credibility were much more complex than our ideas about them. Anyway, there are many different types of logical argument, but the most common are syllogisms, enthymemes, examples, explanations, definitions, and authorities. A syllogism is a logical progression, as shown in this example. An enthymeme is also a logical progression, but it assumes that the reader will think of the key premise underlying the logic without being explicitly told what it is. You use both syllogisms and enthymemes all the time, and I'm less concerned about you knowing these fancy words than you being able to apply logical reasoning in support of your ideas. Examples and explanations are good sources of logic, since people tend to be persuaded by relevant examples and clear explanations of how those examples apply. Definitions are a form of logic to the extent that they put you and the reader on the same page, and citing authorities can persuade logically because we tend to believe something if it comes from multiple sources. These are just a few notable examples of literally dozens of kinds of logical appeals. You can persuade someone's mind, but you may not truly get through to that person until you persuade his or her emotions. When you engage readers' emotions, you keep their interest and you color how they perceive the logic you offer. You can motivate readers to take action if you inflame their emotions along with convincing their minds. There are many ways to appeal to someone's emotions, but some of the most common and effective are using concrete language and imagery, telling emotional stories, and seeking to cause specific emotions through the tone of your writing. Concrete language helps readers visualize what you're describing, which then leads them to feel the emotions associated with it. Stories are naturally engaging, especially if their plots take the reader on an emotional roller coaster. Lastly, if you want to make your reader angry or sad or happy, you need to know the types of things that will likely produce that emotion, and then you must try to put them into your writing. Ethos is a very complex concept. It refers to a culture's way of being and acting in the world, so to speak, meaning that a Frenchman has a different ethos than an American. It is also related to ethics, since a person's ethos may affect their actions, and also because we view ethical people and arguments as more credible and praiseworthy than unethical people and arguments. For the purposes of this class, you should think of ethos as credibility, or believability, or trustworthiness. You can show the reader that your ideas are credible, that they are worthy of being believed and trusted by citing any personal experience you have with the topic, citing any research you have done, and talking the talk and walking the walk as described in the audience video. We believe people with experience, but we don't know that you have any experience unless you tell us so. When you cite research, you are showing the reader that you have done your homework and therefore know what you're talking about. And if you can use the discourse and conventions of your audience, then they will view you as one of them, and thus more credible than an outsider might be. We discuss logos, pathos, and ethos separately because it is easier to focus on one category at a time. However, in practice, the same statement or passage will usually combine elements of logos, pathos, and ethos. The following example comes from an opinion editorial written in the New York Times by Charles Blow. Regardless of your feelings about Trayvon Martin and the George Zimmerman verdict, I hope we can all agree on the quality of this argument. I think Blow's statement, "So what do I tell my boys now?" is a good example of logos, because logically it is the next thing anyone, including the reader, would think, and it also illustrates the fundamental issue at stake in this argument. The final sentence has tremendous pathos, as it hits the reader with a feeling of despair and indignation. It highlights the unfairness and absurdity of having to watch your walking speed to avoid suspicion. The first sentence establishes the author's ethos or credibility, since he has direct experience with what he is describing. In conclusion, you have always used logos, pathos, and ethos in your academic and personal lives, but now that you can name, identify, and describe these means of persuasion, you should hopefully be able to analyze how you and others use them, reflect on how they might be used better, and then apply that analysis and reflection toward becoming a more effective, persuasive writer.